Oh my goodness. This interview is fire that I just did with Dawn Charleston Green. We talked about her being an author, being a coach, and being a midwife for aspiring writers. I had the pleasure of working with Dawn. She helped me through a program that she does called Rising Authors Academy. It was phenomenal. I loved it. And we talked about her being in the military, her being a mother, a wife, the challenges that she's faced, and how she became not just a writer, but a coach for other writers. So without further ado, let us go into the interview to talk with Dawn Charleston Green. When you got out of school, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, that's a good one. I think I wanted to be everything. One of the things I think getting out of school and just kind of the background I came up with a lot of support, both from my mother and father, my grandmother, and then our extended family. I never thought that if there was something I wanted to aspire to do that I couldn't. I knew that I probably would have to, work harder and maybe change some environments and get some mentorship or anything, but I never thought that I wouldn't be capable of doing something, nor would I not have the support of those who loved me. And so initially when I left high school, I I went to college. I never wanted to major in like medical anything. I was not a science girl, but I was always a writer and a talker. And so I decided that I would go to school and major in English. Now, let me tell you. So it would not necessarily be because I wanted to teach English or even that I wanted to write at that time. I felt like majoring in English almost was safe. It was something that I enjoyed doing. I really did enjoy it. My senior year, I had the most wonderful English teacher who taught us English literature just for an entire semester. And I was so afraid about just taking literature because I just was like, what if I don't like the story? But she was a lot like you. She had come out of the theater field. And so she would just make the story so interesting. And so it was actually after going through her class that I decided that I wanted to major in English. But I wanted to I knew I could use it either to write, like I could do it in, broadcast journalism or newspaper. I knew that if I wanted, I could go to law school with it if I wanted to. And then, of course, I knew that the safest space might be to teach. And because I came up in a particular culture, it was always kind of a desire that I would be a wife and I would be a mother. And so I really kind of thought that English would be safe for me to be a good wife and a supporter, that if my husband had to uproot and leave, my background would allow me to go with him wherever he went. Now, did I have a husband when all that happened? No, none of that. But I had aspirations of being a wife and a mother. And so that's how I ended up majoring in English. And so I ended up completely not using it when I graduated, because when I graduated, I joined the Army. I had gone through a little heartbreak, but then also I think that I didn't think I was prepared. When I said I didn't think I was prepared, I don't
What
think
weren't you prepared for? What didn't you think you were
I
prepared
didn't think
for?
I was prepared for life, like the
Okay.
realities of life. Um, I didn't realize then what blessings and favor look like. So I just like, life cannot be this simple, but I didn't know it was because of my connection and my relationship and my reliance on God that was actually propelling the favor that I would receive. And so I just really felt like, hey, you're gonna set you up for failure. It's not gonna be this easy. And so anyway, I decided that I would join the military just to try to get a little bit more discipline and just some more life experiences. I'm from a country girl from Mansfield, Louisiana, small town. It used to be one elementary school, a junior high, and a high school. Now it's only two schools. It's K through 8 and then high school. But yeah, I did not think I was, prepared. And so the same favor that I had experienced early on and, in grade school and then in college, I also experienced in the military. And so that's when I truly understood it for myself, that this is a God thing and not a Dawn thing. It's a God thing.
Now, you had a couple of detours because you got married and your husband is a pastor.
He wasn't a pastor when I met him. Let's
Oh,
be
okay.
clear.
Okay.
Let
Okay.
us be clear. Right. But strangely enough, I knew that I would marry a man of God. Like I knew that like I was going to be a pastor's wife. One, I knew that I was called, but I knew that I would be married to a man in ministry. So when I married my husband, I actually thought I had gotten it wrong. I was just like, oh, I should have like, is this the one? And so anyway, but then God later told me, I told you he would be a pastor. I didn't tell you he would start as one. He has a path that he has to take. So yeah, and it would still be, it would be almost 10 years before I would actually meet my husband. I ran into some other ones along the way before before I actually met my husband. So yeah, after college I joined the military, and I actually became pregnant with my son, and
Rudy,
changed my
who's a
life.
wonderful young man, Mr. Rudy.
Yes, it was really, it's a blessing altogether. Just the relationship that we have, and the relationship we've had from the beginning. So when he was about 5, I met my husband, and we got married, but we still were really apart and struggled those first 10 years because we were dual military. And so a lot of times we would not be in the same place. And so when you don't have an opportunity really to cultivate that relationship, and then life experiences are different and things like that, it's really kind of hard to bridge that gap to what's supposed to be this cohesiveness of a relationship and a family. And so yeah, we struggled in that path for about a decade, if I'm being honest. Yeah.
So what I know you said you felt like you had a calling on your life. What does that look like? Because my audience is actors. And so this may be a whole different conversation for them
Okay.
to
Yeah.
hear someone say, I knew my call back then when I was a kid. What does that look like?
I will say, for me, I had an encounter with God at a very early age. So prior to high school and everything, I actually started having epileptic seizures when I was 5 years old, and I had them from 5 to 10. And I remember the first time I had a seizure, and if anybody has ever experienced this, it's almost like an out of body experience. Like you can sense yourself about to have one, but you can't stop yourself from having one. And so that's what was going, through me at 5. And so at the time, my mom and my biological father were divorced. And so we were living with my grandparents. And so I slept with my grandmother. And so I began to have these convulsions or whatever. And I just remember, my grandmother kind of being the calm in the storm, my mom only at the time being 23. So she was frantic and all over the place. And then we had to drive to the hospital. And I remember hearing my mother cry. I could hear her just crying, like uncontrolled, like because she doesn't know what's wrong with her child. But I remember my grandmother praying, and in the midst of her praying, there was a peace, there was a calmness that all of a sudden came over me. And from that point, I knew that there was someone my grandmother was in relationship with that had some power, that was different, that listened, that she was in relationship with. And so from that point, that was my encounter with God. And so I trusted God at an early age. And then I was some people say I grew out of them, but I had a praying grandmother, and I believe that that I was healed of epilepsy. I haven't had one since I was 10 years old. So just to have that experience so early on, to experience illness and then healing at that young of an age, I knew almost that I had an obligation to God.
I love that you say that. Um, I take it you came from a Christian home at that
I
time. You
did.
guys went to church and stuff. So I'm going to offer another point of view of someone who, as a little kid, knew that I had a calling. I did not grow up in the church. No one in my house was praying,
Mhm.
but at an early age, I knew God. I had a connection. I remember knowing God from the age of 3, maybe 3.5, like literally having conversations with God the way I'm having them with you. And my
Mhm.
home was not godly. And so this is for people who are listening, that if you feel like you had a call at a young age, you did. just to give you confidence to know, if you felt like you heard God when you were little, you did.
Hmm.
I believe that when we are young, we have better communications with God, and
Absolutely.
as we get older, we have to really work on it. But when we're small children, we have, our ear is keen to the
Right.
voice of the Lord. No matter
Hmm.
where you come from, no matter what your background is, God talks to kids
Hmm.
all the time.
And as we become older, we dismiss him. We
That's
dismiss
right.
the voice. We dismiss it. Like, that wasn't it. That couldn't have
That's
been
right. So I
it.
just wanted to stop there for a second, because I feel like this is big. So okay. So then you and your husband got into ministry. You started working in the church, and at that point, what made you decide you want to write? I mean, I know you said you found that you enjoyed writing, that you had a professor that really uh, planted those seeds in you. I want to go now where you say, okay, I'm going to start writing. What did that look like for you?
So I was always writing. Like, I was always even a technical writer. So there were oftentimes, just even when I was in the military, I would always be the one who would have to write the op order and write this. You write well. So I was always in those positions of writing and speaking, no matter where I was. And even talking about the calling and understanding the calling. When I started realizing that no matter what position I was in, God would still kind of use me in the same way. So it didn't matter where I was. He was still going to use me in this way. I was going to be used to bring people together. I was going to be used to encourage. I was going to be used to speak, no matter what field I was in. But from the standpoint of writing and being an author and putting my words out for other people to basically have an opinion of, like or not like, um, I always say that God gave me a love for writing very early on, but He gave me a story to tell when I was 45. And so a part of my story, of course, being Dawn. First of all, I didn't go by my name for years, because I came from the generation of Tamikas and Lashondas and Keishas. That was the generation that I came from. So to be Dawn, it was just kind of like that doesn't fit in with the rest of them. And even the white girls I went to school with, they were Jennifer and Stephanie and Stacy, and so I was Dawn, and it just never did fit in. So I went by Nikki, shortened for Nicole, Dawn Nicole. I went by Nikki for years. But my grandmother used to always tell me that one day I would understand the meaning of my name and walk in it. And so she always told me that I had the power of influence. That she said, you don't realize that people want your friendship. They want to hear what you have to say. They want you to be involved. And so you have to make sure that you always use that power for good. And so anyway, so when I talk about the story that I had to tell and Dawn, I was actually working in child advocacy at the time. I had gotten out the military by this time, and I was actually working in child advocacy with family court with children that were in foster care. And it was so funny because we went to court maybe 3 or 4 times a week, and I always wore some form of gray, black, or white. I called it my uniform, but that was like I was the signature. It was the black, gray, and white. That was the safe place, and I liked it. Never really had a color. Never really had a color. Like I was, I like black, I like white, I like cream, but never like a color. And so I at 45, and having worked in that for almost a decade, um, I my family and I experienced some challenges that we had not expected. We are an adoptive family, and so sometimes when you hear of other adoptive families, you hear about the challenges that sometimes that they didn't know that they were going to experience. And so we went through that, and I had to make a decision to leave my job. And so at 45, you're not leaving jobs and looking for things without having a plan. And that was the other thing about me. I'm very intentional and strategic, and I need to know what the order, what we're going to do this in.
Is that because you were in the military that you learned how to be strategic, or is that is that just part of your nature?
I think it's a part of my nature, and then the the military just exasperated it. So but yeah. So I've always just kind of been that person who needed to know what the plan was. We need to have a plan, and we need to be intentional about this in order to reach success. That's what we need to. And so yeah. So at 45 and kind of being in a position, not kind of being in a position, but okay, God, how am I here? Like I'm 45 and now you want me like to start something new, you know? And so I had a plan in my mind of what I would kind of do as I transitioned into my 50s. By the way, I just made 50 last month. But
Congratulations, 50 is good.
yes. So but I had a plan and a thought of how I thought that was going to be, and God said not so. And so when I found myself in that place, I just said, I trust you. Like it doesn't feel good and I have no idea what you're doing, but I trust you anyway. And so as I just began to process kind of through my own feelings, I started writing and I started praying and I started fasting. And as I began to kind of come out of that dark place that I was in, um, one, God took me from darkness to light, which is dawn, right? So he literally brought me into a place of truly understanding my name. Like when we hear about, all the different, ones in the Bible who, went through a pilgrimage, and when they came out, God changed their name. Like that's what I felt like I had gone through. I had gone through a pilgrimage of sorts, and God had shown me my name, explained my name to me. And so it was so funny because after I came into that place, I started wearing yellow for Dawn. And so that's how like it literally became my color. Like it's been your color the whole time, but I did not understand it yet to that extent.
I'm going to back you up just a second.
Okay.
You said you started praying and fasting.
Right.
Why did you do both? What's the significance in both?
Because I truly needed to connect almost from a naked place with God. Because that transition for me and not working anymore and kind of moving into a different position at this point in my life, I did not understand it at all. It made no sense to me, and I just needed clarity. Even as it related to my daughter, I knew that God told us to adopt. I knew that He had set up. So why would He bring us to this? Why would He allow us to experience these things? When He told us to do this. But I tell everybody all the time, we're always in a rotation of the 23rd Psalms. We either in green pastures, but beside the still waters, on the path of righteousness. And it says that we're on the path of righteousness for His name's sake. Like He told us to do this. But the next part of the scripture is, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So He can put you on an assignment. But guess what? In that assignment, there are some lessons that you're going to have to learn in order to get to that table.
And what does fasting do because we pray, we're always told pray, no matter who you are, pray about it. But what
Mhm.
is it that fasting does when we are up against, with our back against the wall? What is it that fasting does for us?
I'll explain it as a sacrifice. When we think about the Old Testament, it always talked about, they had to, present the sacrifice, that the fatty calf or whatever. But in the New Testament, you know, it says that we present our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto Him, which is our reasonable service. And so for me, it's my sacrifice. God, I'm going to sacrifice these things that I normally enjoy, those things that normally sustain me, but I believe and trust You to be my sustainer. And so that I won't have anything else. You know how sometimes we are driven by caffeine, whether it be Coke, whether it be coffee, whether it be sweets or whatever. And so when we get to that point where, God, I'm going to sacrifice that. And so You're going to have to sustain me because I'm so dependent on these other things when I think about it. And so now, God, I just need to hear from You. And so it gives, honestly, during that time of praying and fasting, there's a clarity that comes. But I remember in the Bible, there was um, a father who came and brought his son to Jesus. Ironically so, it was his son who had epileptic seizures. right? That's one of the reasons I remember it so well. And he asked him, if you believe, do you believe? He said, I believe, but help my unbelief. Because we all have a part of us that we trust and we believe, but what if it don't work out, you know? So we have that part. He said, so I believe, but help my unbelief. And he delivered the little boy, but the disciples asked him, like, we tried to do it, like, why couldn't we do it? And he said, this type happens only through fasting and praying. There are certain things that we face in our life. It ain't just surface level. We're gonna have to go deep. And so in that, we're gonna have to fast and we're gonna have to pray.
I love it. I'm a big believer in praying and fasting. I
Yeah.
fast about 4 times a year, but I
Mm.
wanted to hear your reason. I love it. Okay, so you now started fasting, you started praying, you started asking God to show you what to do at 45. Your name changed. You started using your first name with courage
Yeah.
and with authority. And so what happened when you came out of that fast?
When I came out of the fast, God actually took, I want to say it's Luke 22:11, when it says, Simon, Simon, Satan desires to sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith will not fail. And after you've been strengthened, go back and strengthen your brother. So after I had fasted and prayed, you know, Satan desired to sift me as wheat. He desired that I would give up, that I would, you know, just have bitterness and anger and all these other things. And not that I didn't experience any of those things, but I had to give it to God. And so he said, so now that you've come out of this place, out of this wilderness, now I need you to go back and strengthen your brother. And it's so amazing to me now, looking back on it, coming out of that fast and just really coming into, because when I tell you, crying, praying, on bending, wailing before God, and after I start finally coming out and kind of engaging with others and things like that, the number of people that God sent my way who were in the season I had just come out of, who were having to make, you know, just pivotal transitions at a time in their life that they didn't expect it, you know, just with so much uncertainty. And so that was the part. And after you've been strengthened, go back and strengthen your brother. So our tests that we go through are not just for us. There is somebody else that we have to help encourage, provide wisdom to, and sometimes guide through that process.
So when you finish the fast, now you know that there is a calling, there is a mission, and he's clarifying your vision.
Mhm.
You write a devotional.
Yeah, so the devotional didn't start initially. So I started the platform Dawn of a New Day 365 because of it was a new day. So it was Dawn of a New Day 365 days a year. So that's the point behind the platform name. Um and so I started writing blogs just of encouragement, you know, just hope from despair and those things. And I just kind of my first blog actually was called Family Matters, where I actually discussed how I got into that situation and where I was. And it was just like God just kind of opened it up. Now, before that, I was just going to kind of do Bible studies at the house and do like a little small women's group. And there was a guest who came, and I was having it at my house, but I have a friend who was a realtor and had met somebody. And she asked if the lady wanted to come. She was just coming into town and she wanted to meet people. Well, the lady had the gift of prophecy. And so we're there, and she's been quiet this whole time, and we're having a good time. And this is January 2020. So the pandemic hasn't happened yet. And so right before we get ready to pray, she said, you know, can I say something to you? And she said, I want you to be able to hear me and not be offended or not be scared. And I was like, oh my gosh, we invited her. We don't know what she's going to say. Well, and so she said, this is going to be bigger than this. And I started already dismissing what we just said. I started dismissing, this ain't coming from God. This not God telling her this. And so she said, this not going to be 10, 15 women. This is going to turn into hundreds of women. And I was like, okay, all right, here we go. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, just again, just really dismissing it because this is January. And so of course March happened and we couldn't meet together anymore. And so I began to start writing them. I started sending them encouragement every week. And
So the blog came out of the pandemic.
right, it came
Okay.
out of the pandemic. And then so he gave me Dawn of a New Day 365 and told me to start a Facebook group. And it was supposed to just be for the pandemic.
You thought it was just for you thought.
Right,
You thought.
exactly.
Okay. I just want to clarify. You thought. God didn't say anything about it, but you thought. Okay, go ahead.
And that first day that I opened the platform on Facebook, there were over 300 women that joined.
Wow.
So I just was like, I hear you. I hear you, God. I hear you.
When did you decide, okay, I'm doing this blog. Now let me do a devotional?
Initially I was just trying to have like just kind of conversations. And one, I think because I did not want to push people away by being too churchy. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to be able to kind of build a relationship and didn't want to. And then God had to check me on that. Like, this the call and this what you're going to have to do. This what I told you to say. Keep it together. Um, and so as I, just made sure that even if I just had a regular conversation, I always, incorporated scripture, a lesson. What are the keys that we are taking away from this spiritually? And so as we would have conversations, whether through the comments on the actual blog platform or actually in the Facebook group, people just kept saying like, you need to put these things together and do a book. And so I've always been, girl crushing on Priscilla Shirer and Beth Moore and the like.
For my viewers who may not be in the Christian realm, Beth Moore and Priscilla Shirer are Christian women of faith who speak and they have books.
Yes, yes.
And they're powerful.
Absolutely. And so I had been following them for years, have been, doing their Bible studies. I had actually facilitated several of Priscilla's Bible studies, like 2 women's groups. And so I was just like, I think I could do it. And so I decided that I wanted to start out with doing a 5-day devotional, because how often do people buy 365-day devotionals and do not get halfway through them? So I wanted something that could be easy for people to digest and to get through, but also to teach them how to commune with God. And so that first devotional, the 5-day morning coffee devotional, 5-day morning coffee also has, relevance to dawn, because what do people drink at dawn? They drink coffee. But the group that I was having in my house, that gathering we were calling coffee couches and conversations. And so from that, I took the acronym coffee and made it Chicks of Faith, Focused, Encouraged, and Empowered. So that's how I took coffee. And so that's why I did the first devotional, the 5-day morning coffee devotional, thinking that I'm not talking about the drinking kind, because that energy and, that we get from coffee only lasts us for a while. But if we are coffee, if we're encouraged, if we're empowered, if we're in our word, that type of sustainment keeps us longer.
What made you decide I'm going to go the self-publishing route?
Well, and that's how we met, through Godlywood Girl. So I was a part of, when I came and started the business and started the blog, I was a part of the platform Godlywood Girl with Stephanie Rodnez. And so she was teaching self-publishing. And so I said, let me try to do it. Let me see. But I still was not thinking that it was going to be it. Like, it was just kind of like a, bucket list. Like, let's just check the blog. We can do it. I can do it with a few, people, and it'll be okay. But God allowed me just to dive into a realm of it that I did not expect, and just kind of allowed it to kind of to take off in a way that it could only be Him. And what is amazing about it is during my time of devotion and in the notes that I would take in the prayer time, because I always write out my prayers. In the prayer time that I would have, I would write out, my prayers. And so it was funny to me when people would read the prayers and they were like, these prayers are so real. And I was like, because they are. They are literally my prayers. And they were just like, those prayers, got me through, those tough days, or, those days when I was in it. But I had people who read it and then reread it and who shared it. And so it was truly God ordained.
So you did the first self-published book, which was your devotional, and then you decided you're going to do another book that is not a devotional. And this was for your daughter who was adopted, because going back to what you said earlier, you had faced a lot of challenges that you did not anticipate.
Yeah, so initially I had done a blog called Bloom Wherever You Grow Dandelion, and it was funny. It was during the pandemic. My daughter had a lesson when she was, at home for school, that was on just like the life cycle of the dandelion. And I just became so intrigued with that life cycle. And it just reminded me of the resilience of women, who, regardless of whether people want them in certain places, or regardless of how their beginnings may have started, they find some type of intestinal fortitude to just keep going and just to continue to show up and just be beautiful regardless of what anybody else thinks. And so I was just like, man, this is a woman they talking about here.
And what is the life cycle of a dandelion?
With the dandelion, it can grow in any environment. It can grow in an open field. It can grow out of the concrete. It just needs a crack. That's all it needs. And so they literally can grow anywhere. Like, they can grow in the heat, they can grow in the desert, they can grow, where it rains a lot. They literally can grow anywhere. And so nothing can stop them from being a flower. Nothing, whether you want to or not. But what I found so interesting is that bed of leaf that the stem actually comes from is very flat and spread out. And the reason that it's like that is so that it can prevent other weeds and flowers from choking it. So that's its self-preservation mechanism, right? Dandelions don't need bees and butterflies to pollinate. They're self-pollinators, right? And that's one of the things about them. But then as they grow into that puffball that we become, that we associate with them so often, we say you blow it and you make a wish, but actually what you're doing is you're blowing it and you're spreading the seeds. And so when we think about where we started and the things we go through, and it's so funny because it goes from that yellow flower to the white puffball. And so you think about the maturity of the age. Don't we all go from that stage of being vibrant and bright, and we all end up with white hair at some point, we all end up with that. But the fact that those seeds, and so a dandelion seeds can literally travel 10 miles from where it was rooted. So when you think about that in the flower form, like, that is major. And so when we kind of put that reflection back on ourselves and just kind of see, no matter where I started from, we've been able to persevere, and to save ourselves, even in some very dangerous situations, still show up whether we were wanted or not, because a dandelion, on the weed killer, that's the picture it has. Kill the dandelions in your grass. So regardless of where we are, we're still able to thrive and still able to grow. And if we stay rooted the way we're supposed to be, the seeds of our future will go further from where we started. And so anyway, so that was the blog. But my right after the blog, and it went over very well with the women's group. But right after that, my daughter was having a meltdown. She was having just a day where she just did not feel like she fit in. She just didn't feel like she belonged. She was having problems at school and just so many things, and self-esteem and belonging. And so I thought that it was good for me to share also with her that story of the dandelion. And so after we went through it and I shared all the, the parts about it and everything, and shared with her that she was the dandelion of our family, that regardless of where her start, where her beginning was, that nothing is going to stop her from being a flower. She's going to be what it is that she is called to be. We always go over Jeremiah 29 and 11. God alone knows the plan that he has for you. So you're going to grow, like, regardless of how you started. But our goal and our purpose as her adoptive parents are to make sure that her seeds go further than where she started.
Mm.
And so when we finished having that conversation, I said, "Girl, that's a children's book. You need to make that a children's book." And so literally, I just told the story of me telling my daughter the story. And so then that's from Bloom Wherever You Grow Dandelion, the blog, the book. Hey Dandelion was birthed. But ironically, Dandelion was actually a nickname that I was called as a child.
Wow.
And so it was just full circle. It was
Wow.
literally just full circle. And so, Hey Dandelion took off. The story just resonated with people, not necessarily people who had to be, who were adopted, but it was just something about that story of just kind of belonging and resilience that just really resonated with so many people. And so I was still in the process of trying to continue to market the devotional because it had been about 6 months. So I was still kind of in the process, and it kind of had gone cold for a little while. And when Hey Dandelion came out, it basically brought the devotion with it. So they were both, out there together. And so I ended up that next fall winning some awards for both the devotional and for Hey
And
Dandelion.
again, this was self-published.
Yes,
You
self-published.
decided, I'm going to self-publish this because I think it's important that the audience knows that if they've got a book inside of them, they don't have to go looking for a publishing company, that they can do it themselves. So,
Absolutely.
so now you publish Hey Dandelion, you have your devotional, you learn so much from having to market it because as the self-publisher, you are now the marketeer of the book.
Right.
And so you have these two books. What made you decide that you wanted to help other people who had a story in them that wanted to publish, self-publish?
Once I published, so many people would tell me I started writing a book, years ago, or I started doing this. And I think people just, because they don't know what it entails, they just get discouraged. They think it's got to be hard. It's got to be difficult. I can't do that. And so when I started, just kind of sharing, like, it's a lot easier than you think it is. Like, you just need to know what you need to do, and you literally can do it.
Well, I'm going to stop you 1 second.
Okay. Okay.
It's not easy, but if you are on a mission, you will get it done. Because
It's
it was,
doable. It's
yeah,
definitely
it's
doable.
doable, but it's not easy. Because
Right.
go ahead, I just wanted to put that little
Right.
caveat because people think, oh, okay, I can write. No, it requires a commitment, it requires dedication, discipline, and it requires you to know the steps. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and all those parts. But and I probably say it's easy because I'm coming from being a writer anyway, before I go into it. But I think for some, that's the hardest part. Like, for some, like, we can know the steps and the tools that we need to do. If you have the method and the system down, it is doable. What becomes difficult for a lot of people is the process, like the process of having to commit to writing, the process of having to commit to just, making sure that you're formatting it and just dedicating that time to it, depending on what you're writing about and the audience that you're writing to. Sometimes that becomes very difficult because they just make up an excuse to do something else, versus taking out that intentional time to write and be intentional. And I always share with people, have an accountability partner. So, like, me in kind of serving as a coach and a strategist in this realm now, I will serve as an accountability partner, but I also like, them to find other people that they are coming in contact with who will be that person. Like, hey, did you finish chapter 2? I know you said you were working on such and such. So I think it's also good to kind of have accountability, to just stay the course. Stay the course.
We're part of a group called Godlywood Girls University, and you said you were going to put this class together. And so I jumped on it before you finished the sentence and said, I want it, I want it. And so the course is called Rising Authors Academy. So the thing for me, someone who had put together a bunch of books that I wanted to do, I would start the books, I would get the stuff done, and then I didn't know, okay, what's the next step? And like you said, that you've had people say to you, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Well, I had books I wanted to do for 10 years before, 12 years before, and then I would put them away. I put the files away because I couldn't figure out how to crack the code. And then with Stephanie Rodness, who runs GGU, I started to get an understanding. But taking Rising Authors Academy was probably the best thing I did, because not only did you give us an outline and a system, kind of like acting. You can say, oh, I want to act or whatever, but if you don't have a technique, your acting is going to be all over the place and you're not going to get where you need to go. And so because I'm an actor and because I understand the technique and how you need one step, another step, and you do need accountability as an actor, you need to be in a class, you need to have a teacher guiding you. That Rising Authors Academy was uh, such a great fit for me, in that you gave us structure. I always tell people, you gotta eat the elephant one bite at a time. You can't go, okay, I'm gonna write a book, here it is. It's like, no, it's a step at a time. And you were really um, excellent at giving us the proper steps. So no matter where you were starting from, you had a solid foundation. And you not only did we have accountability, but we got to see everybody in the academy grow. Like
Mm.
everybody who stayed the course during that period got to publish a book. And we got to learn from each other what, oh, they're having difficulty in uploading the book to Ingram Sparks or Lulu, which are our distribution sites. Oh,
Mhm.
that's what the problem is. Oh, we got to understand the technical aspects without losing out on our creative sense. You really were and are a midwife. You
Mm.
midwife people through their book process. And so I really wanted to have you on, because there are so many people out there who want to do a book, or they've written chapters and they don't know how to finish it. And they think the only way to get it done is to find a publishing house. And then sometimes they may go the way of those publishing companies that say, if you give us $5,000, we will we will publish your book and we'll give you some copies. And it's not always cost effective,
Right.
and it doesn't always turn out well. But what I appreciate and what I love about Rising Authors Academy is that the work you put in is what you're going to get from it. If you are committed to making it happen, you're going to cross the finish line. You will have a published book. You will get from it what you do, because once you write the book, it's about the marketing. And so it's not just about the publishing, but the marketing. And what I love about your course, what I love about what you offer, what you teach, is that you are really you are a midwife. I can't think of another word
I like
that's
that
better
expression.
than
I
that.
do.
It is, you really midwife the person through the birthing of the book. It's like, okay, now the book is born. Now we got to get the book to the proper places. Now here's what you have to do. And so I am a big fan of what you teach and what you do, because it's blessed me. Even though I had already published something, it gave me the blueprint, because I did it not having the total blueprint, just okay, I'm gonna get this done, and trial by error. But what you did was you really gave me a system that I can now use every time I'm going to do a book. This is the way you do it. This is step one, step two, step three, making sure you have the people to read before you publish. Have readers, have have people give you feedback, because I think that's an area too that sometimes we get it wrong.
And that's one of the things I always share with anybody when we're starting the process, even when we're doing the discovery calls. I start getting them to start thinking, one, like, who's going to write your forward, and then the other part is, and start thinking about who's going to be those advanced readers. That's what you were referring to, those people before we actually send it to publish and to be distributed. Those people who are going to act as our advanced readers, to be able to have some of those people who are the technical people who can see the structural issues it may have, or the aesthetics or anything. And then part of the people who are your ideal audience, who is the audience that you're speaking to. And I always tell people, try to stay shy of your family, or somebody who may kind of be more invested in what it is that you're doing, because their eye towards it is going to be different. And most of the time it's a lot different from what it is that that you want to deliver.
If someone out there is listening to this and they want to do a book, what's the first thing you say to them?
I say start organizing your thoughts and narrowing it down, because sometimes we have these big ideas and we just want to tell the whole story. And this is what I know for sure about a writer and an author and a storyteller: you got more than one. Because once you start telling one story, it's another story in that story. And so it gives us additional books to be able to write when we kind of compartmentalize it, and start thinking about who that audience is. But the first thing is start organizing your thoughts, because and start writing them down, because when we don't narrow them down and organize them or whatever, they're just scattered. We have to bring them under subjection. We have to make sure that they're under control to kind of start narrowing things down and what we want to say. Sometimes we can't tell the whole story, but we can tell parts of it that then lead to the next thing that needs to happen. And I think as we write, it's therapeutic. When we write, it's really therapeutic. Either we are writing from a place that it was a challenge for us at some point, or we're given, the testimony of what it is. But being able to go back and to reflect on those things is so therapeutic for us. And so we can't forego the process. You can't rush it, because there's something before you ever get it to somebody else. Let me tell you, my most recent devotion, New Day of Grace, right? Just released the end of the year, 2023. When I went into my time of fasting and praying this year for 21 days, I did my own devotional. And I promise you, God spoke to me. I was like, now, was I writing this for myself or what? But literally every day and everything that was going on, I was just like, oh, God, this is you. I had to go through this process. So as we begin to share our story, or prepare to share our story, one, we're going to get to the point where we are comfortable with that we've had to process through it, so that when we tell the story, it's known that it's our story. There's no separation from it. And we have to be, mindful not to get other people to start chiming in on the story, because then all of a sudden that story gets out there and that's not really your story. That's not even the story you really want to tell. And so now when you get opportunities to go and talk about it and speak about it, and they're referring to something that wasn't even part of what you were talking about. So we have to be mindful as we're coached that we don't lose that. And so as a coach, I have to be mindful. I have to, draw back and say, this is my opinion. However, it has to be in your voice. This is what you need to do, because it has to be your story.
What are some of the challenges that you see first time writers make? No matter who they are, you kind of see it over and over again, or challenges or mistakes or mishaps that you go, okay, this is first time snafus here.
Now, one of the ones I had to happen is kind of jumping the gun on the advanced readers. So I started trying to talk, to the potential authors about, or the aspiring authors, I should say. I start trying to talk to them in advance so they can start having on their mind who they're going to reach out to, to talk about that. But sometimes they kind of jump the gun, and so then they're sending them rough drafts. No, you're working with your coach and your editor before you get to your advanced readers. And so sometimes they get discouraged because when they're sending an advanced reader a rough draft that still has grammatical errors, still hasn't gotten that cohesive thought together yet, that advanced reader is going to, tear it up and may cause some discouragement to now that writer does not want to complete this, this book. I don't want to do this. You should have really waited until you had that structure and everything down first before you invited that outside, entity in. So that's one. And I think just trying to rush the process, not understanding the process, and just trying to rush it. I tell people not all books are created equal. One of the reasons that some people don't want to self-publish is because some self-publishers have gotten a bad rep for not following the process, or not finding out what the tools are, what the systems are. They just write something, they put it together, and they get a printer to print it in book form. But that's not the same thing. Printing something and having somebody who is going through the publishing process with you, helping you to edit and format and getting all those structural things, in order, that's needed. Do not just throw a manuscript or just a PowerPoint on, into a book and call it a book. You need to make sure that you at least still get the guidance that you need to put together a quality product. Quality.
That made me think of AI, because AI is a great tool.
Right, a tool. Right,
It is not necessarily the book writer for you,
right.
because I'll see things every now and then on YouTube that says AI will write your book. It's like,
Don't you do that.
oh, I don't think so. But
Right,
so I just wanted to throw that out, because with AI, because it can do certain things, it does not have the sensibility to tell your story.
exactly.
It'll tell a story, or it'll rehash a story from the system, and you think it's giving your story, and it's Mary Lou's story in Alabama, and now you're in trouble regarding copyright and copyright
Right,
infringement. So to
right.
be very careful about that. Something I wanted to bring up in your group that I really loved was that we had people that had very different genres, people doing devotionals, people doing poetry, people doing kids books. When you're writing a book, is how important is it to know what the genre of the book is, or what the format of the book will be?
That may change as you start having conversations, because I can say that as I began doing discovery calls with some of the aspiring authors, they kind of had one thought: it can only be this. And I kind of opened their mind. Have you ever thought about you could possibly, do this? I was speaking to an aspiring author about to begin working with this month, and she was saying that she had written some poetry, but she said, but not all of it is on the same level. Some of it is, not as mature, different things. And so as we started talking about her life and her life story, I said, did you ever think about doing a memoir and including those bits of poetry throughout, so that poetry is a reflection of where you were at that time? So when you were immature or young, that poem makes complete sense, you know and so she was like, I never thought about that. And so that's what I try to do. My husband calls me BIQ, the big idea queen, because I'm always like thinking of, like, have you ever thought about this,
I think
um,
that's a gift. I think that's your gift, and I've seen you in action, so I say it is a gift. I want to ask you, why is it so important for you to encourage new authors? What is it in you that makes you, because you're not only good at it, but it's almost like it is your special power, that it's like your special sauce. It's not, you are able to encourage people in the most beautiful way, with their stories. Where do you get that from?
I think it's just the that calling again. That I've always been able to do that, no matter what field I've worked in, and no matter what I've done. I've always been able to do that. Even when I was in the military, and I was in air defense artillery, a combat arms unit. I had soldiers who, when they were in those vulnerable places of life and life was happening, um, they sought me to have those conversations about. They had to soldier up all the time, and be tough, and do all the things, and defend. Of course, we all trained to do that, but life happens. And so it was just again, just, I guess, confirmation again of that gift. Like, this is your gift, this is what you do. So no matter where I found myself, I was doing it. And so it was just kind of in those places of encouragement. And it's so funny, because I run into people from high school and college, to today, who will say, "I'll never forget when you did this. I'll never forget when you said this. I say this today because you said that." And I'll be like, "Now, child, I don't forgot that stuff. I don't remember saying that." But I thank God, that it was positive, and that it was a blessing to them. I remember a gentleman. He was a basketball player at our school, and he just started a podcast at the beginning of the year. It's something with purpose, and he said that was the conversations I always would talk to him about. We would talk about aspirations and stuff, and I asked him, "But do you understand what your purpose is? So that even if you do this job, is that what God has purposed you to do?" And he said he's never, in all his life, he's never forgotten. So when he had the opportunity to have his podcast, he named it Purpose.
Doing Rising Authors Academy and working with people one-on-one to birth their books, what is the difference between each process for you? Because what does one offer as opposed to another one?
So when I do the general class, I try to take it just from like a collective point of view, where I want to take those students who are a part of it just to understanding the process of just like that general knowledge. This is the basic knowledge. You're going to have to understand how to apply for your copyright. You're going to have to understand how to get your ISBNs. You're going to have to understand what your options are with publishing and printing and distribution, understanding all those things. And so everybody, regardless of what genre, what they're doing, everybody has to understand that. So that's the class portion that takes place. But then when we have the individual one-on-ones, that's really speaking specific to their project. What is it that they need to work on? How is it forming together? And then just kind of making sure that as they go forward, that there is like a clear path. Like, this is the next step. So today we're going to focus on this. This is the homework. And when we come back together, this is what we need to have done so we can move forward. And I just think we have to be, intentional, because again, life happens. And so other things will get in the way of what it is that you're trying to do. So I try to be that person, that one, like you said, I try to be that midwife. I try to be that encourager to keep going. But then I also have a place of firmness too, to just like, okay, this is the deal. This is what this is what we have to do. I guess I try to keep that balance, but I know there were a few that was in the class with you that would say, "Oh yeah, she gets on you every now and then." But I just want to make sure that we're taking true advantage of the time in a productive way. At the end, I'm not trying to just charge people, money to do stuff just to check the block, and I hadn't really said anything. I really want the people that I work with to know that she is serious about my project.
You want them to birth the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, at the end of the day, you want them to birth their book. You want to see their vision come to pass. And
Yes.
sometimes it's important not to want it more than they want it. Because
Yeah.
you get in there and you go, "Come on, you said you wanted to do this. Let's go." And life does happen. Things
Mhm.
do happen, but how badly do you want that book to be born? It's kind of like, again, with acting. It's like, How badly do you need to get out there and act?
Mm.
It has to push you. Your
Mhm.
desire has to push you forward, because there's always going to be something to distract you. There's always going to
Always.
be some life situation to say, not today, you can't do it, and you have to determine, no, I'm gonna do it anyway. Even
Mhm.
though I got this serious thing on the side, I'm still going to contribute to getting my book done. And that's where having someone like you really is a blessing. It is so necessary to have somebody making sure that what you said you wanted to get done, that you are getting done. Because if it's left up to us, we will take a pass, especially women who have children or family. We will take care of everybody else's need first before we get to ourselves. And people who are older, young people have more energy and more vitality, and they're like, yeah, let's get it done. And even though they might be a little more scattered, they will do whatever it takes. They're more engaged to get it done, my opinion. But when you're older, I could be wrong. Please forgive me, people. But what I've learned is, when people get older, when they're in their 40s, in their 50s, where they have a lot of responsibility, sometimes it's like, well, this isn't that important. They will convince themselves, I'll get to that another time. But it's going back to, what did God tell you to do, and um how are you going to take care of what God told you to do? How are you going to be a good steward about what God told you to do? And having somebody to walk through it with is the best thing you could ever ask for. I am such a believer in coaches. I am so grateful that I've had you, that I've had Stephanie, that I've had other people. I don't take that lightly. It's like, okay, I want to do this. Who's going to help me get to the finish line? Because I know that I am slippery. I know that if it's left up to me, I'll go, okay, well, you know what? I'll just roll it down a couple more months, another year. And so Rising Authors Academy is a necessary uh, tool for anybody who has a dream of writing a book. I think this is and there are other places you could go, but I know Dawn. I know how effective her program is. I know how effective she is in helping you. If you make the commitment, she is going to be there with you no matter what. And so I say to you, check out Dawn. All the information is below. I've put everything there for you. Just, do you do like quick consultations? How does
Yeah.
that work?
Yeah, so it really just kind of depends on the need of the person. So, but I have several different options that people can choose from. But I will do an initial consultation, for them. And then, but as people need, just kind of small things. So one of the things that's kind of going on now, versus just kind of having the Rising Author Academy class of aspiring authors, I'm also getting seasoned authors, maybe somebody who went through a publisher before. Maybe they're self-published, but a lot of the ones that I'm working with went through a publisher where they only got the one ISBN, so they only have one format of their book, and they don't necessarily understand how to move the book, how to market the book, how to do anything, how to connect with other authors and get other opportunities. So now that's what I'm doing a lot, where I'm having authors reach out to me and say, hey, I got this book. I don't know what to do about this. Can I meet with you? Can you teach me some things? Even from now having to go back and teaching them how to copyright. They already have a book, but somebody else went through the process, and then once they published, that was it. They were out of it. And so, I'm blessed. And you asked me what did I think that thing was. I think it's my ability to be able to teach, because I take pride in being able to learn a process and then break it down in a way that other people can digest it, because everybody learns at different levels. Not everybody can process things. When it's you can have a class and you're going so fast and you don't necessarily pick up everything. And so for me to be able to learn the person I'm working with, and then deliver it to them and walk them through a process in a way that they can understand, not being frustrated, not, trying to rush through the process or deny them of anything, but making sure truly that they have an understanding of what it is that we're doing and what it is that they want to do.
Now, I'm going to go back for a second because I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. You collaborated on a book with your son Rudy
Yes.
after Hey Dandelion.
Mhm.
So, real quick, can you tell us how that came about and the name of the book?
When I wrote Hey Dandelion, when I wrote everything up, I immediately thought about Rudy the Smart Kid, and just kind of thought about scenarios we had. And I wanted to go forward with it. I knew they weren't going to come out at the same time. I wanted to do Hey Dandelion first, and then we'd do Rudy the Smart Kid. But then I ended up, as a mom, I knew my perspective of the story and the encounter. But of course, with Rudy being an adult, now, what how did he see it? So I wanted also to get his reflection. And so um he went back and kind of looked at the story, and we really had to tweak it and restructure it so that it can truly be his story of talking about it. And I just kind of had some interjections there. So he kind of talks from a perspective of when you are that curious and inquisitive, kid who is not afraid to try stuff and to put yourself out there even when other people don't necessarily understand. And then I really came from the voice of, as the mother, or the parent, how to advocate when you have that type of child, when you have that child that is unapologetically finna show up in this situation, regardless of how people might feel about them, or what their perceptions might be. And so when I say that, meaning Rudy the Smart Kid kind of scene kind of started. We were just leaving El Paso, Texas. We had been stationed out there, but we were moving back to Georgia. And so just the culture was, about to shift. And moving into that culture was very different. And so some people were not necessarily comfortable with how confident this little black boy was, and so as a mom, knowing how to advocate for him and how to protect him, you know so that he can still reach his full potential, because there are going to be some people, just based on color of skin and their own perceptions, will try to hinder that. And so when you have a child like that, how do you keep that love for learning, and that confidence going forward?
What's your legacy? What would you like your legacy to be?
And I thought about that, and it's never things. I never think about, it as being anything I want to leave, other than I want others to be able to see my determination and my resilience, even through difficult situations. Um, the fact that I have always been willing to work hard, even if it meant doing something different that was, unfamiliar to others. But if I was able to open a door, that I would leave it open for those to come behind me.
If you're listening, then this must be for you. Not that I'm saying it, but I am. This must be for you. And you really need to check out Dawn Charleston Green. If you have that book tucked away in your computer, in your closet, underneath your bed, this might be the opportunity. This might be the right now moment. Maybe you're hearing this because God wants to give you a nudge and say, hey, Dawn Charleston Green is right there. Give her a call. I pray many, many acting jobs for you. I pray that you will just blossom to be that star that God created you to be. And if it means having books, then contact Dawn Charleston Green.